Right. Good afternoon. All set? Welcome to the Department's Joint Operations Center, as we refer to it, the JOC. The purpose of holding the meeting here is that the system that we're going to discuss today, the shot spotter system, part of the monitoring of that system will occur in this room. So we wanted to give you a demonstration as to how this system will actually work. I think you're all well aware that the Department has a domain awareness system that has been in place for a number of years, and we will discuss that domain awareness system and how this latest technology blends very smoothly into the existing domain awareness system, and how that system will continue to expand over the next year or so as we add additional technologies to the wide range of technologies we currently use to help us deal with the issues of crime, disorder, and in disaster situations. I'm joined at the podium today by the Mayor and the Public Advocate, a number of our community supporters, as well as members of the Department. Principal presenter will be Jessie Tisch, who is the Deputy Commissioner for Information and Technology, and it's under her auspices that this system is being implemented. The procedure for today, we will have an on-topic presentation on the ShotSpotter technology and the expansion of our domain awareness system, followed by questions on topic. Subsequent to that, members of the Department will be available to answer any questions you might have, police-specific, crime, or otherwise. The Mayor also will then be available for topics relative to issues of interest that you might have relative to him. So we'll give you a little bit of a smorgasbord here today, so just behave yourselves, don't overindulge, and we'll see if we can get out of here before midnight this evening. With that, I'd like to introduce Jessie Tisch, who will introduce the technology system that is now being blended into our domain awareness system. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, that Mayor had a statement beforehand before Jessie comes on board. Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Okay. And Letitia James also.
Yes, it's all good. We're going to make it work. The smorgasbord is going to have something for everybody. Thank you very much, Commissioner. Commissioner, I never fail to take the occasion to express my appreciation for what you've achieved, because it's extraordinary. Under your leadership, this city is safer than ever. 2014, an extraordinary year, a record year in so many ways. And as I'm saying to people all over the country, the lowest murder since 1963, lowest rate of murder since 1963 in this city is something to be extraordinarily proud of. So, Commissioner Bratton, to you and all of your top leadership and all the men and women of the NYPD, I express my appreciation and I commend you for the progress we continue to make. The progress that's made by this department is because of an ethic that is focused on innovation, on constantly improving the work. Commissioner Bratton epitomizes this, and what he did by developing the ComStat system is, I think, the epitome of this notion in the history of our city and the history of policing in our city. But that idea of constantly innovating, constantly trying to take advantage of the newest technology, looking at ways to do things better and differently than before, that pervades this agency, and it's part of why it is the finest police force in this country. There's a long tradition of innovation, and we're building on that today. Today we're rolling out cutting-edge technology to make the city safer, to make our neighborhoods safer, to keep our officers safer. This new gunshot detection system is going to do a world of good in terms of going after the bad guys in this town, going after people who fire their weapons and who we need to identify immediately. This ShotSpotter system is going to allow us to decrease response time getting to the site of a shooting, and it's going to allow us to deeply enhance the safety of our communities and the communication between police and community, because when something happens, we're going to know about it instantly. I want to thank, in addition to Commissioner Bratton, all of the leaders who are here today. Of course, I want to thank Public Advocate Tisch James, who you'll hear from in just a moment, who's been a tremendous voice for deepening our efforts to keep communities safe and bring police and community together. I want to thank First Deputy Commissioner Ben Tucker, of course, Chief Jimmy O'Neill, Chief Boyce, Chief Gomez, Chief Nakunin, and you're going to hear from Deputy Commissioner Jessie Tisch in just a moment on the details of the program as well. It's also crucial to thank the community leaders who are here. because there are many people in this city who have fought against violence at the community level. There's so much the NYPD does, but you'll hear from the NYPD how much they rely upon community leaders to fight against violence, to organize against violence, to share information with the police, to stand up in their own communities and push back against the forces of disorder. Some of the individuals here today have an extraordinary history of standing up for their communities. And let me just say at the outset, people who have stood up for their communities in many cases where it was not easy, where it took not only sacrifice, but it took a willingness to withstand the threats and all of the challenges that came with it. These are heroes because they would not give up on their neighborhoods. And they became crucial allies. And when we remember that 20-plus years of decreasing crime in this city, so many people in this room are responsible. That includes the community leaders who stood up. So I want to thank you all, and I want to name them. Let's appreciate their efforts. Francis and Halvard Brown from Red Hook, from the Community Precinct Council and the Tenants Association, both, I believe. Am I getting it right? Okay. Pastor Jay Gooding and his wife Nicole from Stand Up to Violence, and Myrna Encarnacion from the Bronx Grandmothers Love Program. Love, L-O-V, stands for Love Over Violence. And these grandmothers, many of these grandmothers experienced loss. They lost children to violence, and in so many cases became the caregiver for their grandchildren. They stared down violence and did so much for their communities and are feeling the effects of that violence in their own lives, and that is incredibly admirable, what they have done for this city. So it's an important day for this city because we're really stepping into a whole new world now where we can use technology in such a powerful way to aid the police in what they do. ShotSpotter detects and reports gunshots effectively, instantly. The ShotSpotter system has gone live today in the Bronx, and it will start next week in Brooklyn. This will be in some key areas as we establish this pilot program. And it was very important to get this done that the NYPD coordinate with other city agencies, particularly in the siting of the mechanisms, and I want to thank all the other agencies that played such an important role. What you get with ShotSpotter is real-time information, so the police can respond so much faster. It increases the chances of catching the shooter. It increases the chances of recovering the weapon. It increases our chances of stopping further crime thereafter because you instantly know what has happened and where it's happened. The audio sensors detect gunfire, pinpoint the shots literally to within feet of where they have occurred. And that gives the police the ability to immediately get to the scene. Dispatchers are alerted within seconds and notify the units in the area. And they bring up cameras that are part of this apparatus so they get an instant visual feed. Jesse will go into the details. This has so much to do with fighting crime, and it has so much to do with keeping our officers safe, not only because there's fewer weapons that will be on the streets, but also our officers will go into a situation with a much fuller picture of what they're going to encounter. They won't go in blind. They're going to have a lot of information as they approach the scene of a crime. This is one crucial technological innovation, and it's going to match beautifully with a second crucial technological innovation, which Commissioner Bratton and I unveiled with District Attorney Vance a few months back, the $160 million smartphone and tablet initiative. Between the two of them, our officers are going to have so much more information, so much more quickly. It's going to revolutionize policing, and we're already doing so much right in this town in terms of policing. This is going to take us forward in a very positive manner. Before this technology was available, the reality that we've lived with is by the time a shot was reported, remember, it meant someone had to actually call in the report. If an officer wasn't on the scene, coincidentally, a citizen had to call in the report. The report then had to filter down the line. By the time the police got the report, often not a detailed report, in so many cases the perpetrators had gotten away without a trace. And this is going to turn things on its head. This is going to be a whole new ballgame where the police have the information instantly. And it's going to send a message out over communities that if you fire a weapon, the police are going to know instantly, so there's going to be a deterrent effect. Some of the bad guys in this town are going to get the message that if they fire their weapon, the police will know instantly wherever there is a shot spotter apparatus. Other cities have had a great experience with shot spotter. Some places that have had their share of crime, including Camden, New Jersey, and New Haven, Connecticut, and they've seen a decrease in shootings. There'll be, in this pilot program, 300 units installed across 15 square miles in precincts with a historically high level of shootings. For people who live in those communities, this will be a difference maker. And again, our community leaders here today have spent too many nights where they heard the sound of gunshots out their window. Too many people in this city, in too many neighborhoods, have heard gunshots at night as a sad soundtrack to their lives. It's not something anyone should have to live with. Where we put in ShotSpotter, we know it's going to make a difference. Pastor Gooding said very simply, anything to help reduce gun violence is a blessing, profound blessing for our neighborhoods. And this is going to make such a difference. But Pastor, your experience, you've been on the front line. I want to use your example because I think it speaks so much to the challenge. Born and raised in Williamsbridge, you've seen the effects of gun violence year in and year out. You lead the anti-gun violence program at Jacobi Hospital, and you work with shooting victims. You work in the community to de-escalate the potential for violent incidents, to stop retaliation before it happens. This is an extraordinary human element of crime fighting and the coordination between police and community. Let's add the technology that our community leaders deserve and our police deserve to really take us to the next level. Pastor will tell you he's optimistic about what ShotSpotter can mean. And I think when people see it, they're going to feel more protected. They're going to feel empowered. They're going to feel that things are continuing in the right direction. We are investing in the safety of our city with ShotSpotter. We're investing in the safety of our officers. We're investing in the relationship between police and community. And we're very much investing in our future with this technology. Just a couple of words in Spanish before we call up the public advocate. Estamos anunciando que la ciudad usará tecnología de detectores de disparos para reducir el crimen. Los detectores de disparos estarán en las zonas de la ciudad con más tiroteos. Esta tecnología ayudará a hacer de nuestra ciudad un lugar más seguro para todos. With that, we welcome our public advocate.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor de Blasio and Commissioner Bratton, for your commitment to this issue and for inviting me here today. ShotSpotter is the most recent, clear, and profound example of how adopting technology can help and improve criminal justice policy. As most of you know, I have been a long supporter of not only ShotSpotter, but of other technologies such as body cameras. And as a city council member, I've advocated for ShotSpotter in the previous administration. And on the ground, I knew that ShotSpotter is being utilized to allow the police to respond faster to incidents involving gunshots, literally putting more police officers where shootings tend to occur. Gunfire tracking systems also address a problem that severely hinders police ability to quickly investigate shootings, the phenomenon of underreporting. Because this technology will notify NYPD of unreported gunshots, gunfire tracking systems will help to eliminate that impediment. ShotSpotter's model is designed to minimize false reports, perfect in an urban metropolis like New York City, where a gunshot could be mistaken for a car blowing its exhaust. The National Institute of Justice found this technology accurately detected 80% of test shots, and we have come a long way in perfecting the technology. As with any technology government implements, we can't overlook our commitment to transparency. The information obtained from this program can help guide policy from the City Council to community boards, to precinct councils, to block associations, and of course to the members of the police force. If our goal is to have less violence, more informed policy, and safer communities, today is an important step in that direction. I thank Commissioner Bratton for embracing this technology, as well as the Mayor of the City of New York. It will keep all of us safe. Thank you.
Your turn, Jesse Tisch.
I am Jessie Tisch. I'm the Deputy Commissioner of Information Technology at the NYPD. I'm going to give you some very quick background on ShotSpotter and our pilot program that we have running here, and then walk you through an example which you'll see above me. As the mayor said, our pilot program covers 15 square miles in the Bronx and Brooklyn. The Bronx went live this morning just after midnight, and Brooklyn will go live in 1 week's time just after midnight Monday morning. The pilot includes 300 sensors, 15 square miles, covering 17 precincts. 7 of them are in the Bronx, and 10 of them are in Brooklyn. The way that it's going to work operationally here is that when we are alerted to a shots fired event through one of the sensors or through the sensors, that alert will come into this center, this command center that you're in now. It's called the Joint Operations Center, and in particular, our operations division will be monitoring for those alerts. When one of those alerts comes in, our operations division will dispatch that job to patrol over a division radio. And so I'm going to now walk you through an example of how that works. The example that I'm going to show you was a real shots fired job that occurred this weekend. It occurred before we started dispatching these jobs, so there was no. Well, you'll see the job. All right. So if you look up on the screen behind me, we'll start over on the top left. So that on the top left in the yellow box is the alert that comes into the NYPD's domain awareness system. So officers sitting in the operations division will get that alert. When they open that alert, they'll see a few things right off the bat. First, it'll take them to the place where that alert occurred on the map. You see that in the center panel, and it is pulsing right up there. You'll also see on the map where all cameras in the area are located. If we move over to the right panel, you will see all of the operational details that we get from the sensors. So, for example, we see here on the operational panel that this alert occurred Saturday, March 14th, 2015 at 0049 hours. It located at 2054 Nostrand Avenue. I should pause and let you know that ShotSpotter triangulates. So what it does is it takes 3 sensors and it uses those 3 sensors to find exactly the location of the gunshots. So this example was triangulated to 2054 Nostrand Avenue in Patrol Borough, Brooklyn South. That is in the 70th precinct. ShotSpotter attempts to get the location of the gunshots within 25 meters of where it actually occurred. So that is much more precise information about where gunshots occur than we might expect to get from a 911 call. The other thing that the sensors will give us, or that we'll get in the alert details, is the shot count. So in this example, if you're reading it up on the right behind me, you'll see that these sensors detected 3 shots that were fired. It was multiple gunshots. One thing that the sensors pick up, which is not visible in this particular example, is if the shots are being fired from a moving vehicle or if the individual firing the shots is running, it will give a direction of travel as well. We also see that in this example, 4 sensors picked up the shots that were fired. The closest sensor was 52 feet away from 2054 Nostrand Avenue, and the furthest sensor away was 2,000 feet away. Now, that's all the information that ShotSpotter gives us. But what we did here in New York, which is different than what you'll see in many other cities that have deployed this technology, is we have built ShotSpotter into our domain awareness system, which is a system of sensors that we have deployed citywide. So what types of sensors? We have CCTV. We have approximately 8,000 of them in the domain awareness system citywide. We have license plate readers. We have radiation sensors, and we have all of the 911 and other database data. So essentially what the domain awareness system is one spot where we collect all of the different types of data that the department has access to. And by layering in the ShotSpotter data into this larger system, we are able to see the ShotSpotter information, the gunshot detection, in the context of things like, for example, CCTV feeds that are in the area, or 911 calls for shots fired. So if you look at the cameras behind me, what the ShotSpotter system does is, or what the domain awareness system does, is when we get the alert that comes in, it will queue up all the cameras within 500 feet of the ShotSpotter alert, and it will queue them up to right before the shots occurred, and it will play the audio of the shots with the video from the surrounding cameras all queued up to the same time. So if we could hit play on that. And so the officer, the idea is to take all of this information and queue it up for the officers so that with the click of one button, it is all at their disposal, all timed so that they don't have to go back and do a video canvas. Now, obviously, in this job, you see that the cameras are about a block away, so we did not catch in any of the video feeds the actual shots being fired. But what you have is the CCTV being overlaid with the audio of the shots that were fired. I also want to point out that in addition to the CCTV, we also have in the system, our domain awareness system, all of our database data. So whether that's 911 data, arrest data, warrant data, and we can see that database data in the context of the ShotSpotter alerts as well. So here in this example, you'll see on the left, all the way on the left, on the bottom side, you'll see everything we know about the area around 2054 Nostrand Avenue. So, for example, are there active warrants there? Has there been a history of 911 calls for shots fired? And if you look at the area highlighted in blue, in fact, you'll see the 911 call for shots fired from Saturday morning, which was calling to report the same incident. With the click of a button, we could pull up that underlying record. But the point that I wanted to make there was this alert from ShotSpotter we got in our system at 12:49 hours. And the first 911 call about that incident came in 2 minutes later at 12:51 hours. There were no ballistics that were recovered from that job. And again, because this job was prior to the pilot going live, there was no dispatch based on this alert, but there was a dispatch based on the 911 call that came in at 12:51 hours. That is my demonstration.
A quick summary for you that system went live in the Bronx. It will go on live in Brooklyn next week. 10 precincts, 2 additional PSAs. $1.5 million pilot program for the first year. The system that's in place in many other cities around the country. The enhancement here is that we were able to build it into our existing domain awareness system, which is continuing to grow. Additional cameras, additional license plate scanners. And a little later this year, we already gave you a briefing, as you may recall, almost 6,000 of our vehicles will have GPS locating devices in them. So an additional feature will be, as the shots fired calls come in and are documented like you see in the screen behind us, the dispatchers, the supervisors will also be able to see where is the nearest New York City Police Department vehicle and personnel nearest to the scene where the shooting is occurring. And if we have video information showing a description of the individual fleeing, we'll be able to give that information to those cars. So the technology as it emerges, the domain awareness system, is going to significantly change our crime fighting and our crime prevention and our crime reduction capabilities. So the system, again, is fast. It has improved significantly its accuracy over the years. Additional enhancements we anticipate coming forward will be at some point in time as the technology is perfected. It may also be able to detect different types of weapons, calibers, if you will. An additional feature is the system is able to detect if there is more than one firearm being used in an incident. This is very valuable information to our officers if they're dispatched to a scene to indicate they're going to an incident in which 1, 2, 3, or maybe 4 firearms may be actually being used at that incident location. So there's a significant officer safety enhancement feature to this system also as we go forward with it, officers having a much better idea what's going on. And I'll close by pointing out that around the country, cities that have worked with this system indicate that on average, sometimes in excess of 75% of shots fired calls are never called in to 911. 75%. That's a phenomenal underreporting of incidents of violence in any city. So we will hopefully, over a very short period of time, see if, in fact, that underreporting is, in fact, occurring here in New York City. It also provides us significantly enhanced ability to retrieve evidence. The officers go to the scene. They will be able to search immediately around the area where the shots were fired, see if there are shell casings there that we might be able to retrieve. Additionally, in addition to our 8,000 cameras, they can also scan to see what other cameras in the area, like we do at a traditional crime scene, may have recorded those shots being fired. So in addition to our 8,000 cameras, there's those tens, if not hundreds of thousands of additional cameras on private property that we might be able to access to further our evidence gathering capability. So with that, what I'd like to do is open it up for questions specific to this topic, and then once we exhaust those, we can then move on to general police crime questions before moving on to those involving the mayor. So with that, Jesse, if you could join me back up here, and anything having to do with the technology aspect of it, it's going to quickly bounce the ball back to Jesse. Here you go. Question is that would there be an increase in the number of shootings reported? There will certainly be an increase in our statistics in number of shots fired calls, which we intimately track currently. On the Chief's Department report I get each day, we have the recorded instances, usually 911 calls, of shots fired. So I would anticipate very quickly we'll see an increase in the number of incidents of shots fired. As to whether that leads to an increase in crimes committed, apart from the shooting of the weapon, that we'll have to wait and see as we go forward. Jesse?
Since the Bronx went live this morning, we have had one live ShotSpotter job or alert that went off, and that alert was not associated with a call to 911. So ShotSpotter was the only way we knew about that job. Again, there were 3 shots that were fired, and if you listen to the audio, it's very identifiable.
Another advantage of this is that as we perfect the system going forward, in certain neighborhoods, we're aware that different crews, different gangs are fighting with each other. So if we get a series of shots fired in one location as part of our predictive policing model, there is the potential ability to identify, while we have shots fired here, we know that particular crew in that neighborhood is fighting with a crew in an adjacent neighborhood. So the idea of retaliatory shootings may be occurring for shots fired that did not result in anybody being hit, but a potential retaliation. So there's a predictive policing component that we'll be watching very closely and building into this system also as it goes forward. You have 2 questions in terms of the costing of this pilot program for approximately portions of 17 precincts and 3 PSAs. The first year is $1.5 million, and that's to pay to put in, the company installs 300 sensors, and then the contract with their center in California that monitors this system and then gives us quick feedback on it. So expansion beyond that will be subject, if we're happy with it after a year, be the subject of negotiations with them going forward. It is correct that the reporting that while this was being installed and it was up and functioning in certain areas, it did in fact record the shots fired during the murder of our 2 detectives, Lou and Ramos. An additional piece of evidence in terms of documenting the number of shots that were fired, the time sequence, et cetera, and specific location. This would be, again, something in the future going forward that in any instances we would be aware of shots being fired before they're even called into 911, even if they're not called into 911. But I mentioned about the location devices being installed in all of our patrol vehicles. We would be instantly able to put up on that map where is every police car in that area. So in the instance of, in this instance, 2 officers being murdered, we would be able to identify that we have several cars in that area and attempt to reach out to them, are you okay? And so the combination of features that we're acquiring in the department is going to be a very significant safety enhancement as well as public safety enhancement going forward.
In the example where the 2 detectives were murdered, I just want to point out that the sensors were up, so we were able to go back to the sensors after the fact and look to see if they had picked up the audio. The real-time alerting feature at that time had not been set up, so we did not get a real-time alert at the NYPD about those shots that were fired.
Okay. In the back there, please. You may have to speak up. We have a... Jesse, can you repeat the question?
The first question, or the second question was only $1.5 million invested in this so far? The answer is yes. Your first question was? Yes. Okay. Today, it gets dispatched from here over zone radio, over the radio. However, it is also going to be available to the precinct commanding officers in the affected precincts. They will be able to monitor the alerts associated with their precincts in real time as well. And then when the tablets and the smartphones roll out, those alerts will also be available to the officers who have those devices.
Other side, New York one.
False positive. You said people can't tell the difference between the car back fire. How does this machine know that it wasn't?
So I neglected to mention that there is one step of the process that is very important. And that step is when the sensors hear gunshots, the first place the alarm goes is to ShotSpotter. They have an operational command center, not located in New York, where it is reviewed by a trained technician. And that trained technician, usually within 30 seconds, is able to determine, is this a true positive? Is this gunshots that are being fired? Or is this an engine backfiring, firecrackers, whatever? And in the examples of true positives, they forward that alert into the NYPD's domain awareness system. This is very important for us because in 2011, we piloted similar technology. It was a gunshot detection system. Actually, the technology was different, but it was a gunshot detection system. And there, the pilot was unsuccessful ultimately because we had so many examples of false positives that the whole system just became, for lack of a better word, noise. The other key difference between this system and the system that we piloted back in 2011 is that to trigger an alert here, you have to have 3 sensors that pick up the sound of the gunshots. In the old system, all they required was 1 sensor to pick up the sound of the gunshots. So the old system was 1 sensor, different type of technology, and no ShotSpotter type call center clearing out the noise.
Jesse, would you repeat the question, please?
The question is, who owns the data? Is it the city or ShotSpotter? The NYPD owns the data that is collected by the ShotSpotter system and put into the domain awareness system.
New York one. The selection of the precincts in Brooklyn and Bronx are reflective of 2 things. One, history of precincts with the highest numbers of shooting over time, and then very specifically, most recent history of shooting with victims. So the other areas of the city are fortunate that they don't have that distinction. That was the selection process for picking these initial 17 precincts and 3 PSAs. Again, over time, we will probably seek to expand it, but right now, as I think you're well aware, the Bronx and Brooklyn, unfortunately, have more than their fair share and more than the majority of the shootings and shooting victims that do occur in the city. Okay.
Commissioner, what's your timeline in this phase of the rollout? 1 year, 6 months, 2 years?
Jesse, if you would, please.
This pilot program is a 1-year pilot program, so we will be taking our time to assess the system, hone our operational procedures around it before we roll out to additional locations.
Back in the back. Jesse, did you hear them? Sorry.
So
Repeat it if you can.
the first question was about the details of the shooting that triggered an alert in the Bronx this morning. That shooting occurred Monday, March 16th, 2015 at 1:12 hours, 228 West Tremont Avenue in the 4-6 precinct. The shot count there was 3. We had 4 sensors that picked up that shooting. The closest one was 115 feet away. The furthest one there was over half mile away. There were no CCTVs in the vicinity of that sensor, and as I mentioned before, there were no 911 calls associated with it. Your second question was? We went to visit a number of cities that have deployed the same or similar technology as we were doing our due diligence. We visited Washington, D.C., Nassau County. In New Jersey, we visited Atlantic City, Camden, Newark, East Orange, and Plainfield. And I do not believe that in the course of our due diligence, we came up with any cities that were having legal issues associated with the gunshot detection technology. Yes, a number of cities have tried gunshot detection technology over the past, including, and have been unsuccessful, including the NYPD. And I think it's informative that we waited 4 years before we tried it again, because a lot of the issues that other cities have experienced are very similar to the types of issues that we experienced in our 2011 pilot. Too much noise, too many false positives. You hear these statistics about 99% false positives. And what we've tried to do is mitigate those issues through, for example, requiring that 3 sensors pick up the gunshots rather than 1 before we get alerted, using ShotSpotter's operations center as essentially first adjudicator of the alerts. So yes, we tried to learn from what the other cities that we visited, how they benefited from ShotSpotter, how they operationalized it, but also tried to learn from some of the difficulties that they experienced with it.
One more on this, David.
Currently, shootings are reported each week. Shooting incidents, you have shooting victims. These shot fire incidents, will this go on weekly reporting shootings? And how else does the department make use of this data that belongs to the department in a public way?
So I guess I didn't not quite understand your question. That's right.
Right now we're going to learn about a lot more shots fired.
Correct, right, over and above what we not normally document through 911.
Will that be currently 911 shot fired?
It's what the whole effort we have is to timely, accurate information, and based on my awareness through other chiefs of police around the country of this system, they consistently indicate that there is a very large underreporting of shots fired in certain neighborhoods of their city, usually the high crime neighborhoods. So in terms of trying to have an accurate picture of what's actually happening, this will assist us significantly. My expectation is the number of shots fired reports will go up, but it also will be very helpful to us with the predictive models that we're developing, in that oftentimes these incidents, particularly if they're in a crew area, and we know that one crew is fighting with another crew, that there's a retaliation potential where we'd want to, in addition to sending officers to this location to check out the shots fired, over time we'll get very good at sending officers to another location where very quickly we may have a retaliatory shooting. We're pretty good about knowing when a couple of these crews are at war with each other or fighting with each other. And I'll give you an example from Oakland. When I was consulting in Oakland before taking this position, Oakland has had this technology for a while. I'm getting off the plane being met by a lieutenant from the Oakland PD. He informs me that they just had a murder in Oakland, and so we're now going to go to that murder scene. As we're going to the murder scene, we get to the murder scene, and we're just leaving it. It was documented on a ShotSpotter call also. A call comes in from ShotSpotter about shots fired a short distance away. Immediately, there's an Oakland police officer on the radio that he is basically calling out shots being fired, officer in trouble. Then 911, some time later, a 911 call comes out because 911 calls started coming in about that round of shots. The ShotSpotter picked it up first. notice is going out. An officer in the vicinity of the shots fired is calling it in his radio, and then 911 is calls starting to come in. So I had a firsthand example of that second shooting was in retaliation for the murder that I had first visited. So everything I just relayed to you, I had a real-time example in Oakland back in 2013, I think it was. I'm not sure if shots fired, do we put out shots fired calls currently on our documentation? More than happy to put that out. That's pretty basic information that we have. Okay. Let me just take the one last over here, Steve. Okay. You've been very patient, and I'm looking forward to your performance at the Inner Circle this year. All I want to know is who's playing me. Okay. We'll know who to blame then. Okay. On to you.
So the term sensor has been used here. It's essentially wireless microphones. Are they placed on utility poles? I mean, is there a certain decibel level that has to be broken for these things to light up, or what's the? Does anybody know? I mean, that's a little bit into the weeds. I know. Also, police officers getting this information so quickly, will they be going into hotter crime scenes? You know, because you're getting the information so much more quickly, people there are more likely to be obviously on the scene.
We are hoping that the response will be faster to shots. The example I just gave in Oakland, before the 911 calls started coming in, ShotSpot had already picked it up, as well as an officer who heard the number of shots, who was calling it on his radio. In terms of the devices themselves, that they're very similar in appearance to the cellular phone boxes that you see all over the place. They look very similar to that. And in terms of the detection capabilities, that with the exception of, on occasion, 22 caliber, it's a little below what they can pick up accurately. And additionally, that shots fired in a building, they're not going to pick up, or potentially shots fired in a building out into the street, the detection sometimes would be incomplete on that type of incident. It's really designed to deal with shots being fired in public spaces.
Okay, folks, what we're going to do now, we're going to have a little briefing on some other crime issues, and then open it up to questions.
Dermot Shea will give you a quick summary on crime information as of the CompStat report that went out this morning. As you know, at the end of each month, we're now in the practice of giving you a summary of the previous months, but in as much as this press availability was occurring today, we'll give you a quick snapshot as to how we're doing so far this year. And it also points out how much the percentages can go up and down in a very short period of time reporting. Last week, the shooting incidents with victims percentage was up. This week, it's gone down fairly dramatically because of a significant decline in shooting with victims last week.
Good afternoon, everyone. For the week that just passed, ending this Sunday at 2,400 hours, the city was down 7% overall in crime. So for the 28 days and for the year-to-date, New York City, and overall index crime is down 10%. This past week, when you look at the violence, we had 19 shooting incidents across New York City. That was versus 30 shooting incidents for the week before. So to give you an idea of how much it does fluctuate, last week at this time we were up 21%. We're now up 11% overall. The shooting number is plus 19 for the year, coming out of probably our lowest period of the year. We are plus 19 in shooting incidents and plus 11 in murders. And that plus 11 includes 6 that have been reclassified from last year. Just this past week, we had an individual that was put on the murder count that was actually stabbed last summer, passed away, and now it is being counted as a murder. When you look at the overall through the different boroughs of the city, every borough, every patrol borough and geographic borough is down for the 28 days and for the year-to-date in overall crime. And housing crime and transit crime are both also down. Transit really is jumping off the page. We had 29 crimes for the entire transit system last week. Transit overall is down 10% for the month and 20% for the year-to-date. Really 29 crimes across the city with the amount of ridership that we have is very, very significant. We're down 18% for the month and 18% for the year in arrests. The arrests have, for the most part, leveled off from where we had seen that dip earlier in the year. And when you look at the violence, which continues to be the focus of what we're seeing, 19 shooting incidents. Brooklyn is down in shooting incidents, primarily being led by the 73rd Precinct, which is down 12 shootings. There was a bit of a gang crew dispute going on there last year that was very problematic in the first part of the year. That was handled with additional assets, and now we're down 12 shootings in the 7-3. We continue to try to identify any individuals and groups that are responsible for the violence throughout the city in any borough, and we're working very closely with our partners in the various prosecutors' office to put cases together, and we anticipate as the year goes by, those cases are going to prove very fruitful in pushing the violence further down.
Okay, folks, we'll open up to any police-related questions first, and then after that, if anything for the mayor.
There was a report about NYPD computers or NYPD personnel possibly editing Wikipedia pages related to verifiers from the local people. Wondering if you looked into the matter and if there been any action taken against officers involved.
You're referring to two officers who have been identified who use department equipment to access Wikipedia and make entries. Those are the only two we've been able to identify. And we're in the process of reviewing our social media policies as to giving additional guidance to our personnel as the number of devices is expanding rapidly as to what you can use them for. We have a multi-tier system, a three-tier system in which individuals are authorized to do certain things up to a certain degree. But Wikipedia, for example, would be one. Right now, we don't have a policy specific to accessing that site. Again, we've identified only 2 instances where that's occurred, I think, over the past year. So it's evidently not visited too often by our people that they feel they need to make a correction.
Just a quick addition I want to throw in. This is a well-known city policy that people are not supposed to do personal activities on city computers or other city equipment during city work time. So let's be very clear about this. There's more work to be done to refine all of our policies, but we're quite clear that when you're using a city computer, it's supposed to be for city business. This was not authorized city business. Second, outside of your workplace, when you're not on city time, you have your rights as an American citizen to express your opinion, and Wikipedia is certainly an interesting place to express your opinion since people like to alter the different entries in different ways. But it's not an appropriate thing for someone to be doing on city time.
I'm sorry? They have been identified. I don't anticipate any punishment, being quite frank with you. It's in terms of other than admonishment, advising them of the overall department policy, and as the mayor has already indicated, a general city policy. Again, under our three-tier system, certain individuals are authorized to access for certain purposes. My understanding is these two are not authorized to access Wikipedia. We don't access to correct it. The information's so incorrect most of the time on Wikipedia. We'd spend half our life trying to correct it, so why bother? But in this instance here, I do not anticipate any significant disciplinary action being directed against the two detectives.
That meeting that was videotaped and propagated last week at McDonald's in Brooklyn, one of the defendants had 6 prior arrests. Have you been able to discern or investigate and find out what happened to those cases to allow this?
Let me ask Chief of Detectives Bob Boyce can speak to that particular case. He's been leading that investigation. Bob?
Good afternoon. 5 of the 6 individuals were arrested, and 1 is pending right now. We're seeking that individual now. She's a 15-year-old girl. This particular young lady you're talking about had 6 priors. Most of them were domestic of nature against her own family, and those were pending cases. She had 6 arrests, and she was 16 years old. So they were pending, as far as I know, in family court prior to her 16th birthday. So I don't want to speak too much about that. Those happened when she was younger.
Okay, just a couple of points on this. Look, that video is very troubling. Charlene and I have looked at it, and we've looked at it from the perspective of being parents, and it's deeply disturbing to see young people attacking each other in that way. it is a reminder of how much more work we have to do, that some of our young people have gone astray, and we have to do a lot more work to reach them and try and get them on the right path, and a lot of that has to happen early in their lives. And some of that also involves providing them with the mental health services they deserve, because some of what you see in that video is not acceptable behavior in any way, shape, or form. Second, it is disturbing that there wasn't an attempt to intervene, certainly by any adults who were present, until well into the incident. Even their fellow students should have stepped in to intervene. You don't have someone being hurt in front of you and do nothing about it. So it's one of these incidents I think has touched people and reminded us of how much work we have to do, but I also would make a very clear statement. That's not acceptable. And if anyone sees, particularly a young person, being attacked, and you're in a position to do something about it, don't stand idly by, or at least immediately notify the police so the police can intervene.
This morning, I think you're aware we had two incidents, one in the 104 and 107. I'm going to ask Chief Boyce to give you a quick update on both, in both instances, officers displayed exemplary performance of duty in dealing with the encounters they had in those two incidents. So I'm going to ask the Chief we've had a number of inquiries through media about the incidents, so he can give you the update as to what exactly occurred in the 104 and 107 this morning.
This morning, two incidents in Queens, both traumatic incidents involving handguns, where officers responded tactically correct, as well as showed great restraint and resolve in terminating both conditions without gunfire, without violence. First of all, and by the way, the civilians who helped us out in this case can't be understated. They called 911, gave us specific information. I'll go through them in my narratives, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Helped us quite a bit and probably saved lives by their immediate response. This morning at 8:41 in the 104 precinct in Maspeth, Queens, on 56th Avenue, we have an individual, Jeremy Clark. He is from Rochester, New Hampshire. He's a 27-year-old male. He gets out of his car at the corner of 61st Street and 56th Street, and he parks his red Dodge Dart with a New Hampshire registration rather haphazardly pointed into the curb. And then he walks westbound on 56th Avenue. At this point, a young lady's getting into her van. She dropped her child off at daycare, went in the house, came back out to retrieve a battery charger for her cell phone, at which point she sees him with a gun in his hand walking westbound on the north side of the street. And she tells us later that he looked like a deranged look on his face. She sees him, and she immediately goes into the car and hides, and then she hears a round go off. We believe he fired at her. At this point, he continues down the street and fires two more rounds. We have an individual driving by who pulls to the side and gets on his cell phone, reports the shots fired and a man with a gun. Police officers from the 104 precinct immediately respond, one coming eastbound on 56th Avenue, one coming westbound, tactically approaching this individual with a gun in his hand, excuse me. At this point, he sees the officers coming, and he sees a young lady come out of a building, open a door, and he then goes into that building and then hides in that building as well. She then runs to the back of the house, and she calls 911, and she reports a burglary in progress with a gun. These officers at that time see him. They position themselves outside. They begin to engage him in conversation through the threshold of the door. So they are looking into their left, and they're speaking with him. And they challenge him. We say, "We're the police. Put the gun down. Come out." He says, "You're not the police." One of the officers then takes his shield and sticks it out and says, "Yes, I am. I am the police." At this point, he fires at the officers. One round that goes into a wall, not hitting the officers. There's four officers at this point out front, two sector cars on either end. They retreat back to a safe distance, and they order him out again. Now he comes out with his hands up and screaming and yelling. They then arrest him, have to fight him to the ground and arrest him. We go back inside, and we find the handgun. It is a .38 caliber Smith & Wesson semi-automatic handgun with one live round in the chamber. In all, he fired 4 rounds, one at the officers, one at the young lady, and 2 in the street we have not found. We do not have a criminal history on him yet. He's from New Hampshire. He is with another individual with a rather severe injury, severe criminal history. We're trying to figure things out. We believe both are either mentally challenged or on drugs, and probably the latter, they're on drugs. So right now, we have everybody in custody. We're trying to figure things out now. Again, the officers, the two sector cars from the 104, acted admirably in not returning fire, not making it worse, because there was a woman inside that apartment. The second incident we have is in a 107 in Jamaica Estate. This is on 168th Street in Queens South. Basically, at about 8 o'clock this morning, we have a home invasion at that location. The owner of the premise is a business owner. He owns a nightclub in the 103. This individual we later identify as Edward Leisure. He is a 35-year-old male. He is on parole for robbery. He has 21 priors. He goes into that residence, forces his way in, and does a robbery of this individual. Someone in that apartment who is not in the room during the robbery calls from the back room on a cell phone and states, "This is a home invasion robbery of my home," and officers start responding from the 107 at that point. Within a short amount of time, he takes several $100s from this individual and he leaves. As he's walking out, we're conjecturing at this point, because we're still talking to him, that he hears the sirens and he hears people coming. He walks about four houses down and goes inside that location, where he holds 3 people hostage at around 9 o'clock in the morning. And at this point, a person inside that residence texts his brother outside that he's being held ransom. He's being held hostage, excuse me. At which time, that person approaches the police outside and tells them this is going on inside. About 3.5 hours back and forth with the perpetrator. Emergency service units and hostage negotiators talk him out, and we place him under arrest with no violence. We recover a 9mm Luger handgun, fully loaded, and due to the actions of some brave people who were victims of crimes and the officers' great response and restraint, we were able to close these cases out of these individuals. More investigation is needed. We have to find out more about both individuals. That's what I have.
Folks, just maybe 2 more questions if we can. Any topic you all.
Is there any additional cases of young children being lured by somebody who how many cases have there been?
We have a couple different cases in the 8-8 precinct right now. We're looking at them as well. One we were able to, there's 3 in the 8-8, one of which we found out was a young man throwing snowballs at a car. That's what that happened. That's why he stopped. The other 2 we're trying to look into now and see where they were lured or not. There is another one in the 101 precinct where we will put out a image of a vehicle. Right now, we cannot make the plate. We're going to send it out to a private vendor and see if they can pull up that plate for us and see what's going on with that. But those investigations are ongoing right now in 2 different parts of the city. The 8-8, we do not think they're linked because it's 2 different cars. But we'll go forward and see if we can find something.
I'm sorry, who are you inquiring about? Let me ask Bob Boyce once again to fill you in on the NYPD history with him. I won't comment on the LAPD side of it, but Bob can just give you a quick snapshot of our history involving the first murder.
Yeah, just to answer your question, we have an active missing persons case on Kathy Durst, and we're working as late as Friday. We spoke with the New York State Police on their case in Westchester County that's an active homicide investigation. We have not dealt with the FBI as far as the California side of this. So our end of this is the missing persons working with the state police in regards to that case. What time did I speak to them? Well, we've been going on for the last couple of weeks in regards to that. There's a lot of archival information that we're pulling forth on our investigation as well from back in that time. She lived in the 2-0 precinct on the Upper West Side, so they caught the case. So there's a lot of work done in the case. We're providing that to investigators from the New York State Police.
Okay, folks, last one. If anyone have any? Chris. Did Emma tell us about any new evidence from the LAPD in the Durst case? No.
Not that I'm aware. No, we have not received any. And the FBI, I believe, made that arrest, not the LAPD. but I'm sure they worked with them. But we have not anything to do with that part of the investigation.
Thank you, folks. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Go to other topics. You were going to deprive them of their smorgasbord, Steve. What was that? Smorgasbord time, yes.
I'm not sure if you saw it this morning, sort of funny thing, but you know, so had a lateness generator.
A lateness generator?
Yeah, so it took reasons that you've given for having been late in the past.
Okay, I'm impressed.
Plug it in and give the reasons that you gave and then give you a location.
Uh-huh.
Just wondered if you had seen that, and then...
I look forward to this work of art.
and then anything you're doing moving forward, just to make sure you're on time.
It's always, a lot going on, but as I've said, one of my New Year's resolutions is to work on punctuality. I'll continue to do so. Yes? No. No, the final decision by the parade leadership was to have the one delegation from NBC, which, is progress, and I do commend, but it is not, in that sense, open to folks who would like to participate who don't happen to work for NBC. So I think we still have to go farther. I will not be marching, but I look forward to progress in the future. I do think that the first step was taken this year, and I'm hopeful that soon there'll be others taken. Look, you may have seen the coverage of the Boston St. Patrick's Parade in South Boston, which is now open to members of the LGBT community. Commissioner Bratton and I know something about South Boston and its history. That's an extraordinary statement that now there is a sense of openness. I give Mayor Walsh tremendous credit for what he helped to bring about there. In Dublin, the St. Patrick's Parade is open to all. So this is where we need to go. We're not quite there yet. I look forward to more progress in the future.
Do you think Andrea Stewart-Cousins should be part of the budget negotiation process with Senator Skelos and Jeff Klein?
Look, I don't get into the intricacies of Albany and its processes. I think as the Democratic leader in the Senate, she has a very important voice, so I think her ideas should be duly noted in the process, but I don't want to get into the question of who should be in the room and who shouldn't. Again, I don't remember that instance. I'll just speak about the policies of today, which are clear. If you're doing something that's about your own personal interests and personal opinions, you don't do that on city time. You don't do that with city equipment. It's as simple as that.
So are changes made to your current pay by staffers?
I don't know of any. That's obviously for the people of Israel to make their own determination. I was surprised by Prime Minister Netanyahu's statement about Palestinian statehood. That seemed to be a step away from a principle that has been pretty universally acknowledged all over the world as a goal, to have a two-state solution, certainly a deviation from the policy that the United States of America has supported for many, many years across both Democratic and Republican administrations. So that was surprising, but again, that's up to the Israeli people.
One, two more, guys.
Yes. There was a very large gathering there, unusually large, and people were all over the plaza, and it just made more sense because it was a lot of folks milling around to go through the back.
Last call, guys.
Last call, going once, going twice. Up, yep. I'm sorry? Well, as I haven't seen all the details of it, but I believe one of the issues is the disability question. I've said before, I'll say again, there's a valid concern that we want to find a way to address. I don't think going back to the old approach on pensions is the right way to do it, but I think there are other ways that we can address it, and we're looking forward to doing that.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone. Well done.